Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Force here with some final thoughts on Sniper Ghost Warrior 2. My original plan was to do a full-on review of this game, which would have consisted of me sitting down, reading from a script with my opinion of the game. I have, however, decided to do more of a free-flowing video where I just sit down and have more of a discussion with you guys, giving you my impressions on Sniper Ghost Warrior 2 after completing it. So the first thing I want to talk about is, in my eyes, the most important part of any game, and that is the gameplay itself. Now, when it comes to the actual act of sniping in Ghost Warrior 2, I think it's great. In fact, that's the only real aspect of this game that I derived any enjoyment from. I thought it was really fun to snipe enemies. The problem is, everything surrounding the actual act of sniping seemed lacking to me. But before I dive into that, I want to talk about, once again, the positive of the sniping itself.
He's down. Going head through the gap on the left.
So when you're sitting there about to set up a shot, you've got to account for a few things. The shots are influenced by your pulse, which is increased while running. So you've got this pulse meter, and when you're running around, that's going to increase, and that's going to make it more difficult to hit your target. It essentially is going to add a bob to your shot, making it, again, difficult to hit the person you're trying to. So it's influenced by your pulse, your stance, which you can be standing, crouched, or proned, and then your ability to hold your breath. There's this breath meter that shows how much lung capacity you have, which is important when you're shooting, also when you're swimming underwater, but that's not that important. Not an important part of this game. Now, shots are also influenced by wind speed, direction, and distance to the target. Now, all of these things are factored out, and you're actually given a guiding red dot that will show for that adjustment. However, that is removed on the expert difficulty. So that's only actually present on the casual and normal difficulty, but on expert they do remove that. So if you were looking for more of a challenge in playing this game while sniping, which in my opinion is probably the way to do it, because again, this is really the only real enjoyable aspect of this game, at least in my eyes. So having that red dot sort of takes away that enjoyment. So I would suggest playing this game on expert if you're looking for a fun sniping experience.
Now take the second one. Nice shot.
So again, that is the actual sniping. That is the part of this game that I enjoyed. It's everything surrounding that I felt was lacking. Let's first start off by talking about weapon variety. There is none. You start each level with two weapons, your sniper rifle and your pistol. There are no grenades in this game. There are no trip mines. There are no smoke bombs. There's none of these extras, these gadgets or whatever, none of these extra things that you would assume that a sniper would have. These things to help set up around you, to set up trip mines so that if someone comes to the stairs behind you, to throw a smoke bomb so you can run through it if you've got enemy snipers. Like, none of that stuff is present. You have only got your sniper rifle and your pistol. In fact, there's hardly any weapons in this game to speak of, because you can take out enemies, but you can't pick up their weapons. Now, while I will concede that this is a sniper game and you should be primarily sniping, having the option of picking up, a rifle or some other weapon, an automatic, like a machine gun or whatever, having the option to pick up other weapons, it's baffling to me that it simply doesn't exist. Now, I'm not saying I wanted to pick up a machine gun and run into every level, just mowing people down and not actually snipe, but if I get, caught and they've got people coming at me, if I were a real sniper, I would probably make sure, if it was any way possible, that I'd be carrying something besides a pistol. I know you can only realistically carry so many weapons, but again, we draw that line between realism and video games, and it all comes down to fun. We're playing a video game for fun, at least as far as I'm concerned. That's why most people do it, and not having variety, not having options was terrible. In fact, you can't, okay, there's one thing you can do. You can pick up enemy sniper rifles, but the most infuriating part about that is most of the enemy snipers were in a position where they were inaccessible, so you couldn't even get their rifles if you wanted to. But that's it. You can pick up enemy sniper rifles, no other enemy weapons you can pick up, and essentially, I tell this from experience, after completing the game, I basically never had any weapons besides the ones that I began with, and that was it. So that's lacking, and it's quite unfortunate, because again, having those options, having that variety would have been fantastic. It simply doesn't exist.
All clear. Come on.
Now, the level design in this game is fairly linear. You're basically moving from point A to B, eliminating targets. It sort of works like this. You'll start off a mission, you're either dropped off somewhere, or you're continuing from the last mission, and you'll move to a specific point. You'll eliminate 5 to 10 targets. You'll move to the next area, eliminate 5 to 10 targets, rinse and repeat. That is essentially how the level design works in this game, and it is incredibly linear to the point that there's really no choice in terms of how you approach a counter. It's basically just who do I shoot first, and the way to ideally play this game is to try to eliminate targets who won't alert enemies. Something I was a little confused by, though, is that it didn't seem like enemies spotting the corpses of their allies alerted the guards, and that there didn't seem to be any situation where they were, they were made aware of this, that something crazy is going on and they're going to start looking for me. No, it's pretty much only if I were to shoot someone and they see that shot in action, then all of the enemies in that area will be alerted to me, and then they'll know exactly where I am all of a sudden, and they start charging me, is how it works every single time. If you ever shoot an enemy next to someone who sees it, everyone in this section is going to turn to you and start running at you, except for the snipers. They'll stay at a distance, but that's basically how it worked. So I never felt like I had a lot of options, and again, there's two major reasons for that. One of which is it's very linear, which I don't blame a game for being. Linear is just one way of designing a game. It's trying to give a more story-driven experience, although the story in this game isn't that great either. But besides the level design being linear, not allowing for many options in terms of how I approach an encounter, also, again, the lack of weaponry, the lack of trip mines, the lack of smoke bombs, the lack of grenades, which would have given me more options in terms of how to deal with the situation, made it so that it was pretty straightforward. In fact, so much so, I would say about half the missions, a third to half of the missions, are done with a spotter who tells you exactly who to shoot in what order. In fact, while you can ignore him and shoot someone else instead, it often ends terribly. And very rarely, if I ignored my order in terms of who to shoot in what order, and it literally, again, I'll move into an area of 5 to 10 targets, he'll say shoot this guy first, and then this guy, and then those two guys, and then this guy, and then that guy, and then that's it. Everyone's dead. And then we move on to the next area, and he tells me the exact same thing. He sets these guys up and says shoot that guy, that guy, that guy. Now, in a real situation, a spotter might do this for you, but in terms of the gameplay, the player wants options, and I want to make the decisions, but a third to half of the missions, it was basically played for me because I had to shoot guys in specific orders. That's not fun. I really would have liked the opportunity to make more of my own decisions, as basic as they are, because there really aren't many options for the reasons I mentioned before. So, it really felt like a lot of times that I was missing out on a lot of the fun and the action of the games, which was just so frustrating. Something else that was very, very frustrating was the enemy AI. And the ally AI, both of which were just plain awful. Bad responsiveness and awareness on the enemy's part, really on the ally's part as well. There were situations in this game where I have enemies standing right in between me and my ally would do nothing. He'd be like walking into a wall. And the enemy AI, again, if they see you shoot someone, they'll immediately turn around, they know exactly where you are, and they start charging you, which for one doesn't make too much sense. If there was a real sniper, it'd probably take a little bit of time, but I don't know. It's just the enemies acted stupid. They were always easy to take out, even on the hardest difficulty. The only thing the hardest difficulty really did was remove the bullet assistance so that you could see where your bullet would go after accounting for all the different variables, but that is it. And also buggy as hell. Lots of bugs. Bugs where we've got escort missions and the guy who's being escorted is just doing nothing. The guy who I'm escorting with is also like running around like a chicken with his head cut off, and I'm basically standing there not knowing what to do next because the guy I'm escorting and the guy who's escorting with me, they're both running in opposite directions, like spinning around. It made no sense.
Let's go. Stick close. We can't afford to split up. Keep a close distance, Cole. Stick close. We can't afford to split up.
Keep a close distance, Cole.
We go. Stick close. We can't afford to split up.
Keep a close distance, Cole.
We go.
So it's safe to say the AI in this game was very, very poor, and that didn't help some of the other poor decisions in terms of level design and the gameplay features as well. Now the visuals. Now I did a first 40 look of this game, and I first said, hey, this looks kind of good, and then upon closer inspection I said, this looks kind of bad, and that's the general sentiment of this game. You know, at first glance, because this is done on Unreal Engine 3, they have some really good looking lighting effects, and the scenery seems really nice. In fact, some of the set pieces between like the Tibetan set pieces, the jungles and the lighting and all that stuff, some of it looked really, really nice, but if you look up close, the texture quality was just awful. The objects were flat and just no dimension to them whatsoever, and no responsiveness to the environment. It just looked really bad up close, and also, besides the AI was glitchy, the graphics, the visuals were also very glitchy. There was a lot of flickering that took place, objects morphing, just appearing out of nowhere. And I'm not just talking about draw distance as you come up to a scene, objects in the background basically coming into focus and rendering. No, I'm talking about literally something right in my face just appearing out of nowhere. I also had there was this boat that kept changing colors depending on how close I was to it. Just crazy stuff that you wouldn't expect in a shipped game that you have to pay $30 for. And also, one last thing about the visuals, I thought the animations were very poor. The gunfire, explosions looked ridiculous. They looked like it was from like a 16-bit game in some situations. Like the friggin' rocket from a helicopter scene, the rocket explosion looks silly. All sorts of really, again, visually, at a glance, looked cool. I think there are some really nice set pieces and environments, but when you look closer, it really just starts to fall apart. And then the last thing, and I think the most disappointing thing about this game was that it's only 4 hours long from start to finish. The game consists of 10 missions, each lasting around 15 to 30 minutes long, and that is split up in between 3 acts. It took me 4 hours to complete. Now, I'm not too happy about this. I'm not going to rail on the game too bad because of it, for the reason that it's only a $30 game, and we've got many $60 games that average between 8 and 12 hours. So for a $30 game to only be 4 hours long, I guess that really isn't that bad. Once again, there are 3 difficulties, casual, medium, and expert, so you can get some replayability with that. Although I found that even playing the game on expert, because I went through a second time to play a few of the missions on expert, it didn't make it much more difficult. In fact, all it did was remove some features like the bullet tracking and the ability to spot enemies with your binoculars. It removed those things, but the enemies didn't get any more difficult. They were still very simple to take out, and because the enemy AI is quite basic and, well, relatively stupid, again, it was still really easy encounter to eliminate the enemy. There's also no progression system in this game, no perk system or levels or anything like that, which I guess is to be expected in a game that has no weapon variety to speak of whatsoever, with the exception of enemy sniper rifles that you can barely access. There are collectibles in this game, these little like tiki girls or hula girls or whatever, but they were inconsequential. I saw no benefit to collecting them, and in fact, since the game was so linear, I happened onto most of them by accident, just by going through the level. I wasn't even looking for these things, and I happened to collect a fair amount of them, so yeah. And now finally, the last thing I want to touch on with this game is the multiplayer. It was pretty much unplayable for the first week. Literally, you could not join a game. There was error screens and all sorts of randomness, so but that's been cleared up, and so I played a little bit of the multiplayer. It sucks. There's 2 maps and 1 gameplay mode. There's a team deathmatch mode, and there's 2 maps, and it just I don't know, it's not fun. It's a budget title. This game is a budget title. We shouldn't expect AAA quality, but I still expected more than this. So my final thoughts on this game are it's not great. It's got lots of problems, but the sniping was still fun. And again, as I said at the start, I think the gameplay is the most important aspect of a game, and I did enjoy the sniping. I would recommend, if you haven't played this game and you do play through it, just play it on expert. The enemies don't necessarily get any more difficult, at least it didn't seem that way. The only difference is that they remove the bullet assistance, and you can't track enemies with your binoculars, which basically makes it so you actually have to find them. You know, it makes it so that it's actually a little bit difficult. But overall, I really didn't enjoy the experience. I can't say that I would recommend this game, except for maybe the die-hard sniper fans. But please go into this being aware it's a short game, it's a buggy game, the enemy AI isn't good. But if you are a huge fan of sniping, you still might enjoy it. I would suggest, if anything, probably waiting until the game goes on sale, because again, it is fully priced at $30. Alright guys, well that is going to do it for my final thoughts on Sniper Ghost Warrior 2. Once again, I wanted to do this a little bit more free-flowing than a set review where I would just be reading from a script. Although written by myself with my opinions, I sort of wanted to do this approach for this game in particular because I thought there was a real lot of things that needed a little more in-depth explanation. So thanks again guys for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. I'll plan to do more of these for more games in the future, as I do plan to complete more of these games rather than just give first impressions and give you some final thoughts, be it in this form or in an actual structured review. Thanks again for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. Keep watching and keep owning.
No more stunts, asshole. You understand? We didn't come out here to rescue your sorry ass.
Thanks, man. I'll owe you a beer.
That's 2 beers you owe me. And that's 4. They get a crate of beer.